Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Hope you're doing great wherever you may find yourselves. Blessings to all of you wonderful people out there. Excuse me. Today's video, I would like to discuss with you the importance of complex music. And what got me thinking about this topic is, well, first of all, I'm a lover of complex music. And when we think of complex music, we think of time signature changes, long extended pieces, suites even, that kind of thing. More on that later. But really, what got me going was in my English 4 British Lit class on Friday, a young lady in my class raised her hand and said, "Hey, are you going to get the new book, Catabasis by so-and-so?" And I'm like, "No." And she intrigued me, and she's like, "Well, have you read the Iliad, the Odyssey, the Aeneid, and Dante's Inferno?" I said, "Yeah, I read all those in grad school or undergrad." She's like, "Oh, you're going to like this then." And this was not a term that I remember from college at all, but catabasis means the descent into hell motif. And I'm going to connect all of this to music. So hence the thumbnail, A Season in Hell, exploring the importance of complex music. I'm going to tie that together and everything. And essentially one of the components of today's discussion, if you'll stick around and let me connect the dots, I'd appreciate that. It'll all become clear. I think this is a very important topic, that the descent into hell is part of it's part of the hero's journey in literature, movies, real life, you name it. So it could be symbolic, the hell, or it could be literal, or it could be both. And so I think that the hero's journey with respect to leaving home, you're an aspiring musician, and you're going to leave home. That's the separation stage of the journey. You're going to record in the studio. You're going to go on the road. That's the initiation, really the adventure stage. The initiation is the beginning of the quest stage, which may or may not include the descent into hell. And then you return home, and because your work is never done, you go back and repeat the cycle. A lot of times, Spider-Man, Marvel Comics, DC, the hero's work is never done. And when you do return home, the hero shares their knowledge and is rewarded with various things. So I think this is definitely part of what it means to be an artist or musician. And essentially what I'm going to be discussing with you is how important experimenting is for the artist and, of course, the fans alike. Chasing uniqueness instead of being unoriginal. Now, one thing I learned in grad school is that in the Middle Ages, and definitely in the Shakespearean age, the Elizabethan and Jacobean age, essentially the Renaissance, the English Renaissance, that to be original was frowned upon. People wanted, the art of the day, whether in music or writing, especially writing from what I understand, they wanted to see familiar things. And that's why Shakespeare arguably took plots from other works, and then everything else is his own. So keep that in mind. And I've talked about this before. There's a great YouTube video. It's less than 2 minutes where David Bowie talks about not playing to the gallery, that creative impetus to go against the grain and follow what you want to do. And so nonconformity is what we're talking about here today. And of course, by complex, we mean one of two things. The obvious, or what should be obvious, is if the music is complex, it's not simple. And the second definition of complex is that it's challenging the status quo. It's challenging your expectations. It's challenging the record label's expectations. It's challenging the fans base, their expectations of what you are going to release musically. Now, so in concert with what one of my students said about the book coming out, Catabasis, again, the Greek term for the descent into hell, and something that popped in my head almost immediately after she brought the subject up is the movie Eddie and the Cruisers, which I'll get to in a minute, and then something else tied to all this, which when I got home from work and I tried to take a nap, and then I was like, wait a minute, I wrote a paper on what's called the Goldilocks principle, which I think connects really well to this notion of catabasis and the descent into hell, and so many literary things going on. But we'll come to that. So back to Eddie and the Cruisers, the movie. This is a fictional account of a rock star who gives up his music lifestyle, and he commits what's called artistic, something that rhymes with cyanide, because he's fed up with having to deal with people who don't get him musically because he changed his style. So he's a Morrison-type figure, and in the follow-up movie, the sequel, which isn't very good, we see that he is, in fact, alive and well, and he staged his own demise because and that's, what many interpret Jim Morrison had done. And of course, the song on the Eddie and the Cruisers soundtrack, the last song, is called A Season in Hell. And there's this wonderful scene in the movie where Eddie is listening to the playback of the new album, and it's either one of his bandmates or it's the recording producer or engineer, and he's chastising Eddie. He's like, "What the hell is this? This is not like you to do this. This is, this isn't music," or something to that effect. And for me personally, seeing this at a young age in high school, my dad loved this movie. Watched it over and over again, and I could relate to Eddie's conundrum, because for me, I like music that goes against the grain, that goes against our expectations, because there's some wonderful stuff. Does it always work? No, but in this case, the song A Season in Hell, which is borrowed from the French poet Arthur Rimbaud, who produced this collection of poems in 1873. And Arthur Rimbaud, the poet, who himself bowed out of his creative career because of the same reasons that people allegedly say Jim Morrison did and Eddie in the movie, because he wouldn't kowtow to expectations from outside pressures, fans or publishers, that kind of thing, and committed, artistic, quote unquote, sui something, right? Rhymes with cyanide. So very important. Again, it's the most memorable scene in the movie for me, because it speaks volumes about, wanting to be your own individual. So Eddie's trying to do something different because he's sick of, playing the same old 50s style music. Betty Lou's got a new pair of shoes kind of thing, which is good stuff. I like 50s music, but he wants to, experiment, branch off and try something new, experiment, because in there lies growth. So the song is so important. The song title is so important because it's the song is about wanting to be different and going off into a new direction. So that's so important. Now, tied to this hero's journey and descending into hell and coming out the other end, Dante's Inferno, the Iliad, the Odyssey, where you don't stay in hell, you escape and back into the real world. You have what's called the Goldilocks principle, or the Goldilocks theory, or the Goldilocks effect. And this is the argument where your taste in music, and it applies to science and psychoanalysts and all kind of things. But if we talk about science for a minute, this is the argument that for a planet to have life on it, it can't be too hot, too close to a sun, or too cold, too far away from a sun. It has to be just right in the middle for life to grow, hence the planet Earth and that sort of thing. But if we apply this to music, the theory, when you apply it to music, is the argument that people gravitate towards music that is quote-unquote just right. Now, that's a problem because one man's garbage is another man's treasure, and vice versa. So what's just right for you may be different for what's just right for someone else, or for me, what have you, and vice versa. But essentially, just right, again, I have to be careful with that, means the music is not too much, meaning not too hot, not too complex, and it's not too little, it's not too simple, it's not overtly simple. It's a little bit of both. You get the best of both worlds, right? Think Van Halen, that song. So the music is just right because it's not too complex, it's not too simple. But for me, I like some simple stuff. I like some not too simple, not too complex, but I also like a lot of complex stuff. Again, the problem is define simple, define complex, define just right. But, I think you get the point. So back in college, I wrote a paper where I talked about the hero's journey and compared it to Freud's essay, The Theme of the Three Caskets, which he gets from his analysis of The Merchant of Venice from Shakespeare. So more of that in a minute. But if we talk about examples of complex music, classical music, Baroque, Impressionist, Romantic, and modern classical, those are all under the umbrella of classical, although Baroque is, really something else. But it's under that aegis, if you will. Other examples of complex music: progressive rock, progressive metal, noise rock, no wave, experimental rock. Some of it can be, not all of it. In some cases, not vocal-wise, but musically, death metal is very complex because of the blast beats. There's so many, there's 20 plus different types of blast beats, right? There's videos on that, so check that out. So if we talk about briefly the Goldilocks theory and Freud's theme of the three caskets, a person is, in Shakespeare's play that Freud is analyzing, people are asked to choose one of three caskets: a gold, a lead, and a silver one, and various choices are made. And the key phrase here or word is choices. When it comes to your musical taste, are you going to choose the too cold, the basic, the simple, the too hot, the gold, the really complex music that I mentioned? There are other examples, of course. Are you going to choose something that's just right? For an example, pop rock or 80s metal, that kind of thing. Just as an example, that you may consider them basic or complex, but just to make a point. And gold is too hot or gaudy. If you talk about jewelry, lead is too basic. It's also a toxin. Can't wear it on the skin. Silver for me would be just right. But other stories like King Lear, Cinderella, The Judgment of Paris, where Paris has to make a decision. Who does he give the golden apple to? Aphrodite, Hera, or Athena, and they all try to bribe him with different gifts. So very similar to our choosing of what is our, and of course we may have different musical tastes, but when it comes to our favorite, which of these are we going to choose is really what I'm talking about here. So it begs the question, why do some artists, musicians, and fans lean toward complex music? That's really what I'm getting to here, as opposed to music that is quote-unquote just right or simple. And it boils down to one reason is because we like, I'm including myself here, I lean towards complex music more than anything else. I love classical music, but I love my heavy metal and my, you've watched this channel perhaps enough to know my taste. If not, here it is for much of what I will like, or what I gravitate toward too. What I gravitate towards, there are a lot of artists who are not willing to compromise, at least for the first 10 or 11 or 12 albums in her discography. Rush, if not their entire discography. Neil Young, we know, if you're a Neil Young fan, that Neil Young absolutely totally refused to compromise. He was at some point in his career going to do a reunion album with Crosby, Stills, and Nash, and he left and went on to do another Neil Young album because it wasn't right. It didn't feel right, his words. There's that phrase again, not right. Michael Giro of Swans, totally refusing to compromise. Prince, refusing to compromise. There's this great short where Dave Mustaine talks about one of the arguably flaws in Prince's music is because Prince wrote music for himself. Well, I have a problem with that. You want to write music for yourself because you're the artist. You're the one expressing yourself. So from a poetic standpoint, go knock yourself out, Prince. I totally get that. But at the same time, if your fan base can't relate to your music or your lyrics or both, then you're going to alienate them. So it's a double-edged sword. David Bowie, he, again, won't play to the gallery, he said. You experiment, you experiment, you experiment. Lou Reed, also uncompromising, if you know about Lou Reed. So, again, why chase after what's too hot or complex? Well, it's the importance of nonconformity. Being not going to cow down to pressure from fans, record labels, you name it. Some have. There's much evidence to point in the direction that Night Ranger went from a hard rockin' outfit with their first album to selling out, if you will, because the record label pressured them to. Same thing with Why Damn Yankees broke up. They were paid to not put out another record. It's crazy. And the history of bands sucking up to the label. More on that, and not that in a few minutes. So why choose complex music or be uncompromising or being a nonconformist? Because you want to be an individual. And as Henry David Thoreau said, the transcendentalist, society is always at odds with the individual. Well, as an artist, as an individual, you're at odds with those who are pressuring you and want something else that you want. So not kowtowing to record labels, fans, etc., record label pressure, expectations, you name it. Art is self-expression. It is a form of self-expression, as you know. And a artist with there's artistic integrity. Not everyone cares about artistic integrity, but if you're experimenting, if you're trying new things like Eddie and the Cruisers film, and on the in the movie with the song blaring through the speakers in the recording studio and the guy freaking out, it's about, hey, I'm going to do what I want. This is what I think is going to be the next wave of success, the new aesthetic, if you will, the new trend, if you will. I don't like the word trend, but you get my point. So experimenting is important. Means potential growth. It means evolving as an artist. Without not compromising means not being a conformist and holding on to integrity, your honor. And why do so many fans crave complexity or music that's too hot, to quote Shakespeare and Freud, and the Goldilocks theory in general, and the fairy tale, right? It's because fans crave this instead of the wash, rinse, repeat formula that so many bands have. The go-to band that people talk about that have the wash, rinse, repeat formula is, of course, AC/DC. But in some cases, you don't want bands to experiment. You don't want AC/DC doing a country western album, do you? I don't. So keep that in mind. Now, so this doesn't always work is also something to point out. But back to the Eddie and the Cruisers movie for a minute and the soundtrack. Again, what you have here is a 50s type band. Betty Lou's got a new pair of shoes, as I said, one of the songs that I remember off the top of my head when I wrote it down. And, of course, the last song on the soundtrack is A Season in Hell and is an amazing song because it flies in the face of everything else on that record. And that's what Eddie, the fictional character, was going for. And that's what so many artists that I'm going to present to you in a minute today are going for, because it's from here and it's from here and it's from the soul. It's what the doctor ordered. It's a new way to express yourself. It's a new vision. It's a new aesthetic, as I said, versus being, as I said before, complacent. Now, this descent, or the word I used at the beginning, catabasis, is risky because you could stay in hell, and by that symbolically mean, you alienate your fans and nobody buys your records anymore, that kind of thing. But taking risk is part and parcel for the artist in general, whether a musician or not. What are the potential rewards? growth, as I said, success, new fan base, the art itself, doing it for art's sake. That's really what it's about, right? When you boil things down. Again, self-expression, maintaining integrity, as I said, and broaching new horizons. Think of the wonderful Tennyson poem, Ulysses. And it's also two words I love that are also Greek. It's part and parcel with respect to kenosis and catharsis. So let's get started on talking about bands that have gone down this road, this uniqueness that it at least maintained for a while, if not all the way through. It's hard to, if you have a long career, it's hard to have everything in your discography be immaculate and amazing and legendary. But taking that risk is so important, whether it's a failed attempt or not. Of course, we want the success. We want the risk to come out as a success. But for me personally, I appreciate the attempt even if things didn't work out and I don't like the music. I appreciate that most of the time. So let's start with Rush. They were a unique band for a while, for a long stretch, starting with their second album, Fly By Night. But it's really during the third album that we really see them moving in a Genesis direction. I've gone on record saying before that this album is to Rush what Nursery Crime is to Genesis, because you have two really long passages on both albums. And there's some short stuff on here, but the bulk of the material here is a 12-and-a-half song called The Necromancer, as you know, divided into three parts. Very classical in the sense that you have movements, or sort of movements, or a suite, if you will. And then all of side 2 is The Fountain, Love, Lamnath, just 2 seconds shy of 20 minutes. And that's divided into six movements, if you will, foreshadowing the follow-up album, which you would not have had if it weren't for this. And I'll do another video where I talk about the 3 albums that follow this, or the 4 albums that follow this, could not have been done had it not been for this experimental piece here. And I love this album. I think it's a dark horse, but is definitely experimental, considering the last album, Fly By Night, is more of a classic rock album, for lack of a better phrase, with the exception of the epic track By Tor and the Snow Dog, foreshadowing this, because By Tor returns here. But if we stick to this album, this is a very dark album. We all know the story, if we're Rush fans that is, how Geddy and crew put this on the turntable for Kiss because they were opening for Kiss, and Paul Stanley looked at the band like they were crazy, like, what the hell is this? Well, what you expect from someone who just does, for the most part, hard rock and party songs and anthems and that. And I like Kiss, but I love Rush even more. So, and of course, we have what Neil talks about in many a documentary, the Down the Tubes tour, and they thought they were done with their careers. Thank goodness they were not. And they stuck to their guns and did not kowtow to the record label, who demanded that they do something a lot more commercial. Again, we see this movie all the time, where bands succumb to the pressure. Rush refused, and we get this. And it's not an accident that one of the themes of the title track, which is all of side 1 on vinyl, is about nonconformity, which ushers in later other songs about conformity, especially as a motif or a theme on all of Moving Pictures, or most of Moving Pictures except for the instrumental YYZ. We have someone discovering, or we have a human being discovering the guitar, which is considered obsolete and against the rules, and he brings it to the committee, right, the priest, and they have a fit and say, no, get out of here, music is disallowed in this. What's wrong with you? Music is not allowed here. No creative impetus or insight, or no music is no longer part of our world. Get rid of it. To quote Lewis Black. And then you have the wonderful side B, which is all short pieces for the most part. But this is a lesson in nonconformity, and this propelled the band forward. So again, self-expression. We're not going to kowtow. This is their descent, catabasis. This is their, taking a huge risk. the catabasis or the descent into hell figuratively or symbolically, and it pays off dividends because they come out through the other end the richer for the experience. All right. And then, of course, they follow that up with an even more medieval sounding, even Genesis-like and folky stuff in small parts with A Farewell to Kings. Still not kowtowing to the record label. I think they finally saw the light after 2112's success. They did, and you get extended pieces in A Farewell to Kings. It's still just shy of 6 minutes, but it feels epic. Cygnus X1 over 10, almost 10 and a half minutes, definitely epic. Xanadu, of course, epic track, just over 11 minutes. And then you get the shorter pieces, but all thematically rich. Complex, lyrically, musically, sonically. And then, of course, you get the live album, which is before Farewell to Kings. Excuse me, I'm out of order here. But just a note, just to talk about By Torn the Snow Dog. You get the bow across the guitar, a la Jimmy Page, and the soundscapes in the background while the song is playing on is very creepy and daunting and haunting and goes with the material. It meshes well with the music in the story of By Tor and the Snow Dog meeting to battle. And it sounds like a descent into hell, even though it may not be, because they're fighting on the overworld, which is above ground. But regardless, that's part of what I'm talking about here. And of course, Hemispheres, can't forget Hemispheres. This is, again, like 2112, you have all of side one song in parts, a suite, if you will. Very orchestral in a modern sense, but it has elements of classical music because it's broken up into parts. You have late motifs and that sort of thing, just like in some of the previous stuff. Okay? All right. If we talk about the band Swans, which I've been talking about quite a lot lately on this channel. I've talked a bit about their live stuff, their studio versions. You have them doing new songs on live albums, which is another artist I'm going to mention today. That's being very nonconformist, right? And so a lot of their music sounds like that descent into the underworld musically. It has that descent into hell. Some of it has that haunting atonal stuff, quasi-atonal stuff you hear on that last track on the Eddie and the Cruiser soundtrack. It's just marvelous. David Bowie. Let me pull out my Bowie here. It all begins with the soundtrack, and in the movie, at the end, he lets the fans know, and the bandmates, to their surprise, that he's breaking up the band, just like he said in the song, Ziggy Stardust. And, oh my God, people are out of a job. Well, it's about Bowie not kowtowing to the gallery, as he said so many times. And so you get an album or two after that that's different from the Ziggy Stardust stuff, but then you really get different stuff when he moves to Berlin, and you get this masterpiece, the Berlin Trilogy. You get this masterpiece, and of course, you get this masterpiece, Berlin, the separation, the initiation, and then he comes back home to England, right? Again, Berlin, the kind of descent into hell, symbolically to be creative. Okay, I don't have this because I'm not a fan of it, but I have to give it its kudos to Nico's Marble Index. There's nothing else like this album, I don't think. And so it deserves, even though I don't like it, I respect it. It deserves the respect for being innovative. It deserves the respect for being avant-garde. There's a word, right? A phrase. It's, for so many people, a wonderful, majestic piece of work. And again, I wish I liked it, but I have to give it the props that it deserves because it's so admired and adored by so many fans of just avant-garde music in general, by Lou Reed fans, by Velvet Underground fans, and of course by Nico fans as well. So Nico's The Marble Index. If you've not heard it, check it out and tell me what you think. The Beatles, Sgt. Pepper, Abbey Road, even parts of Let It Be are innovative. The Beatles were always innovative. Think Helter Skelter, their heaviest song, and that just come to my attention that recently, last week, that McCartney did the song because he wanted to do something even heavier than The Who's I Can See for Miles, which for me isn't all that heavy, but regardless, I guess it was heavy of the day. I don't get that, but regardless, Helter Skelter is, a wonderful heavy tune. In the same vein that The King should really get me, as foreshadowing so much to come with respect to heavy music. Even Bob Seger with his first album, The Bob Seger System, and an album or two after that, he's got a song called Heavy Music, which is, his music isn't really heavy, but you get the point I'm making, I hope. But the Beatles, since day one, so innovative, but we really see that them bucking the trend and experimenting amongst themselves, right, to get those creative juices. And it's all done from the genius of Paul McCartney, really motivating, because there were parts during their history where they had had enough and they didn't want to do any more music, but thank goodness Paul kept pushing them. No, we got to do more music. So if you know that story. So I did Bowie, I did Yes. No, I didn't do Yes. Let me do Yes now. If I can find my Yes album here. Yes, here it is. The first two albums, nothing like what comes to follow, starting with this masterpiece, the Yes album. Then you have Fragile, then you have, this isn't the right order, but you have Tales of Topographic Oceans, you have Relayer, which is my favorite, and you have Close to the Edge, which is my second favorite. So yeah, bucking trends. This is their Descent into Hell album for me. This is where they're really going down into the cave to explore and being richer as they come out of that cave for the experience, richer for the experience. Pink Floyd does not begin with The Wall. Begins with their first album because of the song Interstellar Overdrive. But really, like Yes's Fragile, with you get disc 2, each band is showcasing, you can't see that because it's too small, but each band is showcasing its talents by having their own compositions. Richard Wright's wonderful Sisyphus Parts 1 through 4. Roger Waters' quirky, folky Grantchester Meadows. Then you get the silly Monty Python-esque several species of small furry animals gathered together in a cave and grooving with a pict. Not a great song, but it's quirky. I like it. And then David Gilmour, perhaps the highlight of the album with The Narrow Way Parts 1, 2, and 3. And then Nick Mason's The Grand Vizier's Garden Party Parts 1 through 3. I love this stuff. The live album section is great, but I really like this experimental going down the rabbit hole, or descent, if you will, that I call it, so to speak. So I love Uma Booma. And of course, we have to talk about The Wall. How many albums can you name where we take a member of the band who does their memoir as an album, a snapshot of their biography, if you will, all right? And that's all I'll say. And it's dealing with madness and depression because of the loss of a beloved member, his dad, right? And the trauma that still haunts him and that kind of thing. And then if we talk about his solo stuff, just to show you this, you have the talking type singing here. You have Eric Clapton on here. This is not a great album, but I appreciate for what it is. Some guests here. The print is too small to read, but this is another example of that going down the rabbit hole, and it's not the best example because for many it's a failure. I like it, but I don't love it, but it just gives you another example of changing gears, and for many it's their cup of tea, if you will. If we talk about Uriah Heep for a minute, just the second album, all of side B is Salisbury, and they never did the likes of this again. Very daring, very experimental, and it works. Too bad there wasn't more of it. How can we forget Miles Davis? It happens a little earlier than this, but this is really where he shows the world that he's going to, do more of a rock and roll style jazz fusion type jazz. And he's got 12 plus people on all the music here, including, of course, John McLaughlin. This is really where he sinks his teeth into going down this new road, if you will, these new horizons, the rabbit hole, the descent into madness, symbolically speaking, and it works. And of course, he alienates the jazz purists of the day, but those of us who love this period as I do are richer for the experience, as is Miles and his players and his fans. Two more examples here. If we talk about King Crimson, I'm not the biggest fan of these albums. I do like them. I'm not in love with them. We talk about Discipline. My least favorite of the trilogy, Beat. And then my favorite, some days it's Discipline. It's hard sometimes. Three of a Perfect Pair. Combining the quirkiness of King Crimson with Talking Heads type. And I do not like the Talking Heads at all. But some of this I do like because of the guitar playing of Adrian Belew, and of course Adrian Belew wasn't a Talking Heads, but his quirky guitars. I have two more examples. His guitar style his quirkiness, and it's both quirky and majestic and compelling. There's so many words to describe. Beatlesque, if you will. We all know his love of the Beatles, which I adore. One of the things I like about Adrian's music and him as a rock icon, right, is his love of the Beatles. How can I not like that and appreciate that, even though he's more of a Beatles fan than I am? But I get it. So I'm more of a Wetton, Bruford, Weir, Cross, and Fripp person. But I do sink my teeth into these sometimes, and sometimes I'll play these back to back to back. So gotta include it, going down, into the rabbit hole, the cave, the descent into hell, whatever metaphor you want to use. Let's talk about, I have actually a few more than I thought. Santana with Caravanserai, that fourth album. So leaps and bounds different from the first three albums, which are my favorite and I love, but that fourth album is my fourth favorite, go figure, and I love the guitar playing on that. Sticking with similar bandmates, Journey, their first three albums with Greg Raleigh and Neil Schon. I love those first three albums. I was listening to them yesterday. All three of them back to back to back. I love these. That first album, what a great debut. And then you have two jazz fusion-y type songs in Topaz and Kohoutek on the first album. I think Kohoutek's on the first album. But anyway, and then the second album, a lot of, and all three of these albums have amazing blistery guitar work on all three of them, as I said, which blow out the water the wonderful guitar work that's on Eclipse, which I'm not a big fan of it aside from the guitar work there. But I know a lot of people don't like these. Well, especially they don't like Into the Future and Next. I adore these albums. And so Greg Raleigh and Sean really experimenting and much different from what they were doing in Santana. And they're richer for the experience, as we are fans of that as well. So I mentioned Santana. Two more now. Here is the most recent album from Uncle Acid, formerly Uncle Acid and the Deadbeats, Nella Ora Blue. This is far removed from their first five albums, where you have psychedelic doom metal, for lack of a better description, and those albums are wonderful. They're my favorite. I need to give this a fourth listen. I like it, but don't like it. Essentially what they did is they got together and collaborated with former actors and producers of Giallo films, did Italian suspense thriller horror movies, and did a fictional soundtrack to a movie. And there's some wonderful stuff here, but I'm not sure if all of it works. But this is yet another example of why you experiment at the risk of losing losing fan base and that sort of thing. And then finally, how can I forget Neil Young? Definitely refusing to compromise. With the exception of the MC5, how many albums can you think of where the music is totally new music? But unlike the MC5, this is not his first album. Time fades away. And then from a mental standpoint, this is the beginning or the continuation of Neil's descent into depression. You have the Ditch trilogy, which I did a video on not too long ago with not necessarily in this order, On the Beach, Tonight's the Night, and well, you get my point. And speaking of Tonight's the Night, I've said this before, this is the really the second album, even though it came out third. This is the descent. This is him really at the center of his descent, I think. And what a marvelous album. Dealing with his depression, from feeling alienated from his own success, and of course dealing with the death of two beloved friends of his. And of course he does it again live with Tonight's the Night Live on Roxy Tonight's the Night Live. So those are just 3 examples of that. So yeah, this is the first part of the Ditch trilogy, and then you have On the Beach and Tonight's the Night. Just drew a blank there. So there you have it, everybody. This is, I think, a very important topic, that it is so important to understand why musicians and artists alike go down the quote-unquote rabbit hole or the dark cave. Think Luke Skywalker in Empire Strikes Back, to explore the self. He cuts the head off what seems to be Darth Vader. It's really his own face staring back at him. To face your own demons in the context of Neil Young, that sort of symbolic descent into hell, but also just exploring complex music, not for the sake of exploring complex music, because there's something unique and avant-garde and just something so special about complex music and unique music, or whatever you want to call it. It's not for everyone. And I don't get mad or upset when someone doesn't like complex music like me. But I love my prog rock. I love my concept albums. I love my, descent into madness type stuff, like the Neil Young stuff. Madness, not necessarily literal, but, the dark stuff like Caress of Steel, as I mentioned. And of course, the Neil Young stuff that I showed you is very dark, but for different reasons. The Caress of Steel album is all fictional, but like Roger Waters, the Neil Young Ditch trilogy is based in biography and reality. So again, I think it's so important, if you're a person who loves experimental music, that we come to an understanding that we're richer because of this music, that someone shared their pain with us or shared their joy in overcoming their pain. Of course, that's more important. That's what we want. And for those people who aren't fans of complex music, or music that's, to relate to the Goldilocks principle, too hot, give it a try. You have nothing to lose. Thank you so much for watching. Take care. God bless. Bye now.